Had them all long before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. Had them all long before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up through some bucks down. Todd told the valet pull the truck round. Push the line after we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And ain't the best for my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like on Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for they prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all line before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. Bought that flight to Amsterdam. When my accountant and minus my family found out too and didn't like it. You're not in the salon with Dale said and I thought he was biased. Then I got a Venmo that said copy the finest. Before my foolishness settled in, recorded a whole tape before we got to Berlin. This close to giving up but now never again. Don't overlook the work and come expecting to win. In the end, my word, never put nothing over the squad. Got it right up under their nose and try the facade. Off the cliff with broken wings, I'm aware of the odds. Enough faith for us all, I'm the one for the job. Most days, catching sun rays, baby, look like the front page. Overthinking what they might say, have it your way. Yeah, the biggest threat is something they never seen. Dial it up, patch me into the screen. I had them all line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up.
Good evening, everyone in Lukman Nation. Happy Friday. It is I, Jackie Lukman, and you are here in Lukman Nation. Welcome to another episode of Live in Lukman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media, on the most dangerous platform on social media, Black Power Media. Thanks a lot for joining us today, a little bit earlier than usual. Got a lot going on. So we're going to get to it forthwith. It is the third Friday of the month, and this Friday is Blackonomically speaking with our friend, Dr. Linwood Tauheed, and I'm going to get it right this time. Dr. Tauheed, Associate Professor of Economics, University of Missouri, Kansas City.
Got it.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Always a pleasure.
A lot. I mean, the pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is absolutely, and Brewski says hello, everyone, right on cue. A lot going on the past few weeks, 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks have been chaotic. I'm sure frightening for some people, extremely busy for us radical revolutionaries who look at geopolitics from an anti-imperialist perspective. But I mean, there's no escaping, Dr. Tauheed, that this conflict has economic ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
But before it has economic ramifications, I think that the way we are seeing it reported, or the events leading up to the conflict not reported from 2014 on, is really troubling, because what is being left out is not just, as I've said many times on this platform and on so many other platforms over the past 3 weeks, as we talk about every day on By Any Means Necessary, on Radio Sputnik, not just the involvement of the US, the EU, and NATO in really starting all of this back in 2014, but the presence of neo-Nazis. And I'm not, this is not hyperbole. We're not making this up. This is not, oh, they're, they saw, a couple of, white people doing some bad things and they're fascists. No, we're serious about the fact that there are fascists in Ukraine because it is being reported in places like, let me pull this up very quickly. We talked to Brian Meir earlier today on By Any Means Necessary, and he broke down how Brazil is being infiltrated, and they're actually pushing toward the Ukrainization. They're trying to Ukrainize Brazil, meaning that they are trying to fill the Brazilian government and the army with the same kinds of fascists and fascist adjacent folks that exist in Brazil. So there's this article. I'll drop this in the chat for you all so you can read it at your leisure. Hold on, let me go back over here really quick and make sure you have it. But it's not just one country that is focusing on Ukraine and people of the fascist political ideology. A socialist website, who I understand, the World Socialist website, they got their problems. They don't think that race is that big of a deal. Okay. But they are reporting also that Ukraine is becoming an international rallying point for neo-Nazis and mercenaries. I'm going to drop this in the chat for you all also. So I think aside from Dr. Tauheed, the question of why isn't the media talking about the neo-Nazis in Ukraine? Then the question becomes, okay, once this war is over, no, let me be a little bit clearer. Why is the media not talking about the neo-Nazis in Ukraine and all of this money that the US has just, for $13 billion, I think, they say it's aid, but we know it's going to, a lot of it is going to weapons. Does Congress know that they're arming Nazis?
Well, I think Congress has, I suppose, plausible deniability. We can quote plausible because it's not in the news, right? But it's not like, quote, progressives. We're not talking about the Azov battalion and the wearing of the SS insignia, and also the coup that occurred in 2014 that was driven by fascists to oust the democratically elected president at the time, who was friendly to Russia. And there is, of course, this old, going back at least to World War II, conflict between the Nazis and the communists. And so they are in type in Ukraine. The Nazis are against the communists, so they are on the typical page. What's astounding about this is that progressives who know there are Nazis in Ukraine know that the U.S. government has been sending aid, quote aid, and weapons. Some of the aid is very blatantly weapons to the Ukrainian army, and the Ukrainian army, even though we're told that only a small contingent of the Ukrainian army is Nazi, they are an official. The Azov Brigade is an official branch of the Ukrainian army. It's not like you have a militia that's out there on its own. They're
Mm-hmm.
an official branch, and they are receiving weapons that are being sent to them from NATO and the U.S. And they are carrying on their agenda, which appeared, most forcefully, I guess, in 2014 in the overthrow of the democratically elected president. And so progressives were talking about that at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have become silent. I was looking through some social media and came across a blog that had an interesting title to it. It says "Liberal Ladder of Nazi Minimization." So
Mm.
step one, there are no
Mm.
Nazis. Step two, there are a few Nazis like everywhere else. Step three, there are lots of Nazis, but Russia is worse. And the blogger indicated that we are here. The fourth step is, are Nazis really that bad? And I think progressives skipped the first step. They didn't deny that they're Nazis. So they're actually at the fourth steps. Are Nazis really that bad? And I say that because I was
Yeah.
listening to a quote progressive white radio host who comes on one of the Sirius XM channels. If I won't give his name, but you possibly know who I'm talking about.
Oh, come on, drop some names.
No, 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 no. It's someone that I listen to because on progressive issues, he's usually on the right side. But he's saying that he's been to Ukraine sometime before. He actually met Nazis who had fought in Hitler's army, and he's saying, these Nazis are not real Nazis. They're fake Nazis. And I wanted to call in, but when I do that, I never can get through because I wanted to say to this radio host that was mighty white of him because these real Nazis and fake Nazis have no problem with him, but the fake Nazis and
Mm.
real Nazis have a real problem with me. And
Right.
so progressives are overlooking the fact that there are Nazis in Ukraine because Nazis don't have a problem with them. The
Mm.
problem is with black folks and other people who are not white, and it's up to black folks and others who are not white to decide on how we need to think about this situation. I mean, on one sense, imperialism needs to be resisted, whether it comes from the east or the west.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't matter. But black folks get trampled. The African proverb, about the elephants trampling the grass. We're the grass, and we get trampled
Mm.
every time the imperialists fight with each other. And we need to decide on how we're going to survive this conflict and what we're going to do in terms of how we think about geopolitical issues going forward, because we are naive, and the white progressives can afford to ignore the Nazis right now, but we can't. We can't afford that. And it was
Exactly.
interesting. You put Brazil in here, and it brought to mind a conversation that I had with a student probably 10 years ago, maybe a little longer. At one time, UMKC, University of Missouri Kansas City, we had lots of Brazilian students coming into our econ department. And students come to our econ department because we're a progressive department. We are a heterodox economics department. So all the students who are here, they know who we are. And I was
Mhm.
having a conversation with him, and he's Brazilian, but he is very much white Brazilian.
Mm.
And he was denying that there was any race problem in Brazil.
Oh, of course not.
You
No.
know,
Well, they're not
you know,
killing those indigenous people and
yeah.
tearing up the Amazon. No,
And
no.
of course, he comes from a privileged background.
Hmm.
And that's how he gets to come to school in the United States. And it was like I'm shaking my head because we have Brazilians who are very much aware of the race problem, but this young man coming from a privileged background denied that there was a race problem. But Jair Bolsonaro's election shows that there are fascists and Nazis in Brazil who are powerful enough to elect a president, just like there are in the United States.
Mm. Hmm. Exactly. And when we talked to Brian Meir earlier today, and as you will see, folks, in the article, Jair Bolsonaro actually was corresponding with the neo-Nazi groups in Brazil, saying things like, "You guys are the reason I'm in politics." So the idea that people were calling Bolsonaro, the Trump of the tropics. Oh no. He's probably the Goebbels of the tropics, if we really want to be honest. But there's a question in the chat that I want to get to because I want people to understand why we're talking about this. Now, Gregory Jones, you asked, what role does the presence of Nazis in Ukraine play in the Russian annexation and invasion? Good question.
Good question. I think one of the things that is becoming very obvious is the old saying, the first casualty in war is the truth.
Is the truth.
It becomes very obvious that both sides are lying through their teeth. On the other hand, Vladimir Putin is saying that one of the reasons that he's in Ukraine is to denazify Ukraine. Now, that's a tall order. But right now, the Russian army is surrounding Mariupol, and the Azov Brigade, a battalion, has taken up residence in Mariupol. And one of the reasons that they're sieging Mariupol is to destroy the Azov battalion. But that's not all of the Nazis; they're not all there. And so I doubt that Putin will be able to, quote, denazify Ukraine. But that is given by Putin as one of his reasons. It seems plausible to me because it was the Azov Brigade that has been shelling into the eastern Ukraine, into the Donbass, where there were Russian citizens, and the reports are that there have been thousands of Ukrainian citizens of Russian ethnicity who have been killed since 2014.
2014,
right?
yeah.
Yes, since 2014. And those Russian citizens have been appealing to Putin to come and save them. And so if you want to give Putin an excuse, you have at least two there, the Nazis in Ukraine and the shelling of ethnic Russians in the eastern part, in the Donbass. And you have two republics there that have declared themselves independent of Ukraine, which they have a right to do according to the agreement that was signed after the coup. And so they have a right to do that, and NATO should have been supporting that right of them to do that. But since they didn't do that, they left it to Putin to say he's supporting that right. Whatever his real agenda is, he certainly has things that he can hang his hat on for going into Ukraine.
Yeah. And I'm going to share an article with you all really quickly, but this is another comment from Steve, who said, I would say their role is very small. This region has had land disputes before the formation of the United States. They have fought over this for hundreds of years. Well, that's partially true and partially not true. This particular dispute is not about land disputes, so to speak, those hundreds of years old land disputes. And if we want to talk about land disputes, we can go back to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that literally split Ukraine in half, giving the western part to Poland to control and giving the eastern part to the Soviet Union to control. And that's why the eastern part of Ukraine is ethnic Russian today. But this particular conflict started, and to answer both questions, Gregory's questions and Steve's comments, this particular conflict was put in motion in 2014 when Viktor Yanukovych, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, he didn't have acrimony with Russia. He was not like, I hate Putin and I don't want to have any dealings with him. But he also wanted Ukraine to be a part of the EU, the European Union. So the EU they offered him a trade deal. I can't remember the name of the trade deal right now, but I talked about it in a previous show. And as Yanukovych is considering the trade deal, Washington is watching very closely because, see, Washington wants Ukraine to be a part of the EU. Why? Because Ukraine is basically the last country on the border, the European border of Russia, that NATO doesn't have weapons in that's pointed at Moscow or troops. So Washington is watching closely. Yanukovych looks at the deal. He agrees with pretty much everything except for one. I think it was one and two other one other uh, uh, um, part of the deal. But the first part of the deal was that Ukraine would have to sever all economic ties with Russia. This was a problem for Ukraine because Russia was its largest foreign investor. So Yanukovych is looking at the economics of his country, and he's asking the EU, okay, if I sever ties with Russia, will you backfill all these losses that we're going to take by losing all of these investments from Russia? He asks over a period of months. He never got a satisfactory, according to him, he never got a satisfactory answer. So at the last minute, he decides this is a bad deal for Ukraine. For Russia's part, Putin pretty much does what he always does. He just sits back and sees how the things will fall out. Of course, Russia has a material interest in Ukraine. And if that is true, if we accept that Russia has a material interest in Ukraine, then we also have to accept that the EU has a material interest in Ukraine as well, for the same reasons: minerals. There's the Donbass and Crimea regions, Luhansk, those are mining regions. Those are working class people. They're mining regions. And they actually didn't want to be a part of the EU deal. The Eastern European, the eastern part of Ukraine, they didn't want to be a part of the EU deal because they saw what the EU did to countries that had, large working class kind of industrialized sectors like they were. They modernized them. And what happens when capitalist countries modernize something? People lose their jobs. People lose their livelihoods. So they did not want that to happen.
Right. The interest turns from industrial capitalism to financial capitalism.
Right.
And industrial capitalism at least has the virtue of paying people for work. Financial capitalism brings in the financial institutions who suck all of the additional value and profit out of the working class folks. And so they were happy with industrial capitalism, but they didn't want the Goldman Sachs of the world to be in control of their destiny.
Right.
And so so we have this much longer history. Now, that question it takes a particular form for me. It says that this has been going on forever. So what's the big deal now?
Right.
It's the same kind of format where we talk about, for example, African descendants of slaves in this country, of the enslaved, and say, well, that's been going on forever, so no big deal now. It's you talk about the discrimination and so forth, that's been going on forever, so it's nothing we can do about that. That's no big deal. That's the kind of form that question takes. But people are being killed now.
Right.
There and here because of this history that, unless we do something about it, will continue on, because the powers that make a living make a living without earning a living, are going to continue on. In economics, political economy, you call this rent extraction, or living off of the surplus. You're living on other people's labor without having to labor yourself. And this is what, of course, financial capitalism moves on. And of course you have, about, if I remember, $800 billion worth of weapons that is in a bill coming through Congress. Well, the thing about $800 billion worth of weapons is those $800 billion worth of weapons have to be purchased
Right.
from weapons manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an $800 billion,
Mm-hmm.
invoice to weapons manufacturers to supply weapons into Ukraine. So they will certainly benefit. And then there's the oil interest. Almost all of the oil that travels from Russia to Europe comes through a pipeline in Ukraine.
That's right.
And Nord Stream 2 was actually trying to working around that by going up through the Baltic Sea,
Mm-hmm.
and to avoid that pipeline through Ukraine. And that was to make actually Russia less dependent on Ukraine being in the middle, transferring oil. But of course, Ukrainians get a transfer fee, so there's an economic interest
Mm-hmm.
for them to keep that relationship going. Not an interest to destroy the relationship they have with Russia.
Right. And so where the Nazis come in, the
Mhm.
US and the EU were not happy that Yanukovych did not sign that deal. So Viktor Yanukovych, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, had to go. There
Mhm.
were originally organic protests against Yanukovych not signing the deal, but those protests were quickly taken over by the very present fascist element in
Mhm.
Kiev. And when you hear the US media talk about Euromaidan or the Maidan protests,
Mhm.
they're talking about the fascists who infiltrated that protest and turned it into a massacre. But
Mhm.
I want to share with folks this screen because it's not it is not the case that the U.S. has never reported on the presence of neo Nazis in
Mhm.
Ukraine. This is from USA Today, and this is an article that was published in March of 2015. They literally say in the headline, volunteer Ukrainian unit includes Nazis, not neo Nazis, Nazis.
Mhm.
If you scroll down into the article, they're talking to this guy. His name is Alex. It's his real name. He says, I'm a Nazi. And at least half of my comrades are
Mhm.
Nazis. And for people who believe that, the neo-Nazi or fascist element in the Ukrainian army has no significant impact, um, 10 to 20% of the group's members are Nazis. And later on in the article, I think they point to the fact that there may be 20% of the Kiev army
Mhm.
being affiliated with some fascist neo-Nazi group. I mean, that's not a small number of people, especially when you consider that
Mhm.
immediately after the US implemented a coup,
Mhm.
using those fascist forces in the Euromaidan protests,
Mhm.
ran Viktor Yanukovych out of Ukraine, installed a very right wing, fascist friendly government.
Mhm.
They immediately began the civil war against the industrialized working class Crimean and Donbass regions
Mhm.
that voted to secede from Ukraine rather than be absorbed by the EU. And then they saw those Nazis and they were like, nope, nope, we know where this goes. And they
Mhm.
wanted to rejoin the Russian Federation. That's the
Mhm.
vote you talked about. What they get for their exercising their democratic rights, they got Barack Obama on the House floor saying the United States does not recognize the vote from Crimea and Donbass, and neither does the international world.
Mhm.
So for
Yes.
8 years, this civil war has gone on where
Mhm.
these fascist elements in the Kiev army have been literally killing tens of thousands of ethnic Russians. And I don't know if you want to call it restraint. I don't know if you want to assign any uh, positive, but Vladimir Putin has been he has been restrained. Russia has been restrained. Yes, they've sent troops. Yes, they have helped arm what the media calls the pro-Russia separatist regions. It's literally the people who voted to secede from Ukraine and
Mhm.
rejoin the Russian Federation. But
Mhm.
what Russia did not do was launch a full-on war back in 2014 when all this happened, because I think Russia, or at least Putin, since people want to make it personal, Putin did the same calculus, I think, that Stalin did, interestingly, after World War II. That, yeah, Stalin might have wanted to expand communism, but at the time, the Soviet Union was too weak after the war to risk tangling with the United States, which had formed the Bretton Woods Agreement, which had was implementing the Marshall Plan, formed the World Bank, the IMF, NATO was formed. Stalin sees all this and he's like, yes, I like communism and I want to support the states where I have influence in supporting socialism and communism, but I'm not stupid. I'm not fucking with the United States because now they've got this international gang called
Mhm.
NATO, and I'm not. So I don't know, Dr. Tauheed, and I'm not trying to give Putin the benefit of any doubt. I'm just thinking as a state leader would. I mean, I know that if I engage fully militarily in
Mhm.
Ukraine, I'm not going to be just dealing with this Kiev army that's full of fascists. I'm going to be dealing with NATO and
Mhm.
all of the member states of NATO. And I just feel like we're at the point with this with the invasion,
Mhm.
was that, after all of this time, I just kind of look at it and go, well, hell, what else was Putin was what else was he supposed to do?
Well,
If you're surrounded by bullies and they keep punching you in the face, eventually you got to punch one of them in the mouth.
right, and Joe Biden has made it very clear that the U.S. is not going to send soldiers into that process because as stumbling as he might be into, or at least apparently stumbling into this conflict by allowing the bullying to go on, he's not completely out of it in understanding that if this were to escalate into a nuclear conflict, it would be devastating, and certainly the Europeans have to understand that. I mean, when Stalin, as a Russia, was not yet a nuclear power.
Right.
The U.S. had a few atom bombs, but that has to be weighed. And now, both the U.S. and Russia have enough bombs to wipe out the whole Earth many, 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 many times. And you don't want to put. I mean, the good advice, the statesmanly advice, the statesperson advice, is you don't want to put a situation in place where someone would accidentally or accidentally on purpose unleash a nuclear weapon to the other side. When the Soviet Union fell, they had nuclear weapons distributed all throughout the satellite countries, and they had a difficult time getting those nuclear weapons back. In fact, Chechnya and Georgia and some of the other states told them, no, we're going to keep the nuclear weapons, and
Right.
and there was great panic in the world, as there should have been, because you're talking about small states with nuclear weapons, possibly by accident
Hmm.
sending a weapon somewhere, and starting a war. And so you don't want to trip into a situation where where a nuclear war is started accidentally, and the Europeans certainly don't want to do that because Berlin is as close to Kiev as Moscow is to Kiev.
Right.
A missile fired from Moscow would get to Berlin in a matter of minutes. Particularly a
Hmm.
hypersonic missile. And so you don't. So the Europeans are right there. The U.S. is another 6,000 to 7,000 miles away. Missiles would take longer to get there. So I can't see the Europeans wanting the set up a situation in which they could be annihilated, and the U.S. would stand by and say, well, what happened.
Okay.
So there's not going to be that kind of engagement in even if it should happen that a missile, not a nuclear missile, a conventional missile were to go off course and land in some NATO country. I think those countries would be restrained enough not to respond, because accidents like that happen, and they happen with nuclear weapons. That's something different.
Yeah, yeah. And if people knew how close this country has come to nuclear catastrophe, just
Hmm.
domestically, you'd be terrified. Every day you'd be terrified.
Hmm.
And just for the folks in the chat, the Stalin comparison was just about strategy. I know that Vladimir Putin is not a communist. He's not a socialist. Last the Friday of the military action, in his speech, he practically said, "Fuck Lenin." And screw those Bolsheviks. And no, I know that Vladimir Putin is a capitalist.
Yeah,
Yes, I know that. So no, he's not trying to spread communism. That was not my point. But
yeah,
okay, so people all over the world, from all over the world, these neo-Nazi fascist adjacent folks are traveling to Ukraine, Dr.
yeah,
Tauheed,
yeah.
and they're being trained
Yes,
in actual combat, in actual warfare.
right. Neo Nazis in the U.S. And this is also something not very much reported. It comes up every now and then, but we know that there are neo Nazis in the U.S. who have enlisted in the army
Mhm.
and enlisted in law enforcement in order to get training, and also to be able to kill black folks and other people of color under the color of authority.
Mhm.
Right? This happens all the time, and it's deliberate. And so, it's exacerbating when you have a police shooting of an unarmed black man, for someone to say, well, we need more training. I mean, I don't know how you train a neo-Nazi not to kill black folks, particularly if you don't acknowledge that that's a huge problem. But now, these neo Nazis who would go into the U.S. military, or perhaps have already been in the U.S. military on law enforcement, are traveling to Ukraine to get involved, to basically pick up the extra U.S. weapons that are being sent there. And some of them are not just, we're not talking about assault rifles. We're talking about anti-tank missiles and anti-aircraft missiles and all that. I mean, the kind of things that President Biden gave a speech. I think it was on January 6th, about January 6th, the previous year, about the insurrection. And he made a statement that, if those folks, the right wingers, think they're going to take over the U.S. government, well, they need to have more weapons to do that. They need to have military weapons, maybe some nuclear weapons.
Mm,
Well,
mm.
who knows what they'll be able to pick up in
Yeah.
Ukraine. And they were serious about assaulting the Capitol on January 6th. They
Mhm.
just didn't have enough of them in the plan. But I guarantee you they are planning,
Mhm.
and Ukraine is part of their planning. And it's not just neo Nazis from the U.S. or Brazil, right? Think about that. Neo Nazis from Brazil going to Ukraine, picking up military weapons, coming back to Ukraine to perhaps make sure that Bolsonaro does not get overthrown or unelected
Mhm.
in the next
Right.
election, and Lula will come back. That's their agenda.
Mhm.
But you also have neo Nazis from Europe
Right.
who are going to
Right.
Ukraine and coming back, and it may be a little more difficult to get military weapons back into the U.S., but to get military weapons from Ukraine into Western Europe, that's just driving a truck.
Right. Just walking across
you
the
know,
border.
you know. And so the rise of right wing fascism in Europe, not just in Germany but all over Europe, of course, has been occurring for a while because of the reaction, the reactionary agenda of those who are against immigration of quote non-whites into Europe as a result of wars started by Europeans in Middle East and other parts of the world. So this is called blowback.
Mm.
You start a war somewhere and you get immigrants into your country, and now you're complaining about that. Well, here's a war in Ukraine, and neo Nazis are going there and they're picking up military service. And when they come back to the U.S., there will be blowback
Hmm.
to that.
Yeah.
Now, again, Black folks need to think about how we think about that, because is it going to be like, oh, there really are Nazis in the U.S. Or in Ukraine? We can't lose our understanding of that's the next step. It's
Yeah.
not in our interest to go to sleep and not to. It's in our interest to push U.S. media to acknowledge that there are neo Nazis in Ukraine who are significant in the Ukrainian military. I mean, again, the Azov Battalion is not some far off militia; it is a branch of the Ukrainian army.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, and this is why I reject any conversation that people have about, this is just, white on white crime, and what does this have to do
Mhm,
with Africans, and what does this have to do with the continent, and you know that there have been Africans on the continent who have come out in opposition to the U.S. narrative,
mhm,
but people don't want to hear what they have to say. It's interesting how Black people in the US will seemingly sometimes use the continent for to to disprove the importance of something that they don't want to pay attention to, but when actual Africans weigh in on the topic, then they don't want to hear that. That's just
mhm,
ridiculous.
mhm,
So Dr. Tauheed, so there are neo-Nazis now. As if they weren't everywhere. They were already everywhere, but now they've got a whole cache of
mhm,
brand spanking new US manufactured weapons in
mhm,
Ukraine.
mhm,
At the same time that all of this is going on and people are denying the existence of these people, India has
mhm,
just purchased oil from Russia in
mhm.
rupees.
Right.
In rupees. Russia has already sold oil to China in Chinese yuan. I think I
Mhm,
pronounced that correctly, the Chinese dollar. And the
mhm,
Saudis, who are the head of the oil cartel,
mhm,
they're considering selling oil to China also in yuan.
mhm,
This is, remember when I said, folks, about Bretton Woods a few minutes
mhm,
ago, and I will talk more about that later on in the webinar that I'm going to be participating in for the Albuquerque chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're going to be talking about the history of how NATO was created and
mhm.
these financial agreements that NATO was actually created to defend.
Right.
So what do these three prospects, India buying oil from Russia in rupees, China buying oil from Russia in yuan, and Saudi Arabia may be considering selling oil to
Mhm,
China in yuan, what does that do to the Bretton Woods agreement, the global financial capital infrastructure that was created from Bretton Woods, the
mhm,
IMF, the World Bank? What does
mhm.
that mean when these three major countries decide we don't need the US dollar to trade with each other?
Well, yeah, just to put some background here. We don't need a lot of background. We understand that when we talk about something called a petrodollar, we're talking about the ability of countries to purchase oil from Saudi Arabia and other oil producing countries with the dollar as the standard unit of account. And so the ability to purchase oil becomes the standard by which currencies are measured. The U.S. becomes the international measure of the value of currencies. That this comes out of Bretton Woods, but it also comes out after World War II, when the Saudi Arabia is set up as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Aramco is formed, right? The
Mhm.
Arabian Oil Company, and so the trading system that's set up to initially allow trading in oil becomes the trading system that is the guiding light for all trades, mostly in the world, and that's under what's called the SWIFT system, which is an interbank system by which countries trade in dollars for commodities. Well, the fact that Saudi Arabia, which is the number one oil producing country in the world, and Russia, which is the number two. Now, if you consider the U.S. is actually the number one oil producing country in the world, but it's also a very large user of oil.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it only exports a little bit of the oil it produces. But Saudi Arabia exports quite a bit, and Russia exports also quite a bit. And heretofore, those exports have been denominated in dollars. Well, for now to move away from the dollar denominated system, Saudi Arabia is going to exercise purchases with in China in the yuan, and Russia also is participating in what is called the cross-border interbank payment system, which China has been working on for about 10 years, and has clients that are already in this process of using the yuan as the currency of trade. But it is very significant that the petrodollar is moving to the yuan, right? And it's not that Saudi Arabia will stop trading in dollars, but the fact that the Chinese interbank system will begin trading massive amounts of trade means that other countries who want to trade in wheat can trade in wheat in yuan. Rubies become a secondary currency. That is, the Russians will rubles. The Russians will convert rubles to yuan and have a trading agreement that way, as opposed to having to convert rubles to dollars, which of course they can't do very well now because of the sanctions. So they have to
Right.
do something, and so that brings Russia into the financial system that the Chinese have in place, but now are gaining clients. You mentioned countries in Africa and South America who are not joining the sanctions. They have to think that if they need to trade, who do they trade with, and what's the currency of trade? And if that currency of trade becomes the yuan, then the Chinese interbank system becomes the rival of the Western interbank system. And we go back to, during the Cold War, we had a multipolar world. It was the Soviet Union and the United States. The Soviet Union collapses. We have this unipolar, major power situation that the U.S. wanted and hoped would last forever. But then, Nike opens plants in China and starts to extract dollars from the U.S. system to the trillions of dollars, and now they have enough to begin their own banking system to make themselves self-sufficient, as
Mhm.
any nation should want to be. And so we have the bipolar world coming back together, but instead of the Soviet Union being the antagonist, it's China on the other side. It's hard to be antagonistic to the company that's making the country that's making your T-shirts, and so this is a very different situation in this multipolar world. President Biden is threatening Xi in China that if they help the Russians in military aid, that there
Mhm.
will be consequences. But what are the consequences? What could the U.S. do? We already have a supply chain crisis, which is caused by during a pandemic where the Chinese very deliberately shut down their economy and created a depression or recession in this part of the world. They're doing that again because of COVID. So we have
Right.
COVID causing Chinese to act in a certain way. and we have other countries that are looking to regain trade in a Chinese system, which creates a multipolar world.
So that was the answer to your question, John. Yes, this does create a multipolar world. But I have a question for you, um, Dr. Tauheed. You mentioned Aramco, the Arabian oil company, I think. And I don't know a whole lot. I just know when it was created. Is Aramco state owned by Saudi Arabia?
Aramco is state owned. The Saudis have had a plan to issue an IPO. Aramco is worth about $2 trillion. It's the largest company in the world, and the Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, wants to do an IPO, but their IPO they don't want to do the whole IPO. They just want to do about 5 to 10%. Well, 5 or 10% IPO into a $2 trillion company is significant, but they are wholly state owned.
So if Aramco is state owned and the US, the EU, and NATO don't like socialism, how come Saudi Arabia hasn't been invaded by the US, EU, and NATO, Dr. Tauheed?
Well,
And Venezuela has been sanctioned. Cuba has been blockaded. Africa has been, recolonized practically by Western multinational corporations. How come Saudi Arabia can have socialism, but the rest of us can't?
well, it's socialism for the good of the West, right?
Mm.
And so it wouldn't matter if it's fascism or communism or socialism or anarchism. If it benefits the West, then the West is going to support that position. An interesting thing also in this Saudi Arabia, China, Russia connection is that Saudi Arabia also wants to explore nuclear energy because it realizes that oil is not going to be there forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they're wanting to say, okay, how do we finance? How do we produce energy? Well, first of all, how do we make the oil last as long, longer and longer?
Mm-hmm.
But also, if we run out of oil, it becomes too expensive to pump it. We need sources of energy. So they're looking to nuclear power, and they have agreements with Russia and China to build nuclear reactors in Saudi Arabia.
Wow. Thanks, Ricky Ryan, for this point. Yes, they did. The U.S. stole Citgo from Venezuela, literally just took
Yeah.
it. Took it. So, yeah. So, okay. There's been a lot. There's a lot to digest. And I do understand that these kinds of topics are very complex. They involve a whole lot of history. That there is some importance to the World War One and World War II history of the Poland, Ukraine, now Russia region, because neither Germany nor the Soviet Union liked the treaties that came out of World War One, the Treaty of Versailles with
Hmm.
Germany. That's what Hitler was so pissed off about. And then there was the Treaty of Riga, I think, that the USSR didn't like, that carved up Poland. So that there is some importance to that history, but
Hmm.
this conflict, I think, Dr. Tauheed, starts in the immediate sense in 2014 with
Hmm.
a folder that Joseph Biden was given on Ukraine and what
Hmm.
the US, EU, and NATO wanted to do to and with Ukraine in order to use Ukraine as a proxy state against Russia. So all of that foreign policy,
Hmm.
geopolitical history, and deep state kind of skullduggery, I guess, aside, what are the things that we Africans in this country and our brothers and sisters on the continent should be aware of? What should we be looking for economically that will impact us because of this?
Well, moving into a multipolar world as it was in the prior Cold War. You mentioned proxy wars. Ukraine becomes a territory for the struggle between Russia and the rest of the West. Africa also, in a multipolar world, can very well become a place where the quote the great powers. Now that's probably going to be China, with Russia as a vassal, if you will, of China and the U.S. And the Chinese, of course, are heavily invested and investing in Africa. African countries become the place where those proxy wars are fought, and so we see the death and starvation of millions of Africans as the growing capitalist countries. China is a state capitalist country. As they fight their wars, African nations can either become places for proxy wars, or they can realize what they need to do is to organize as a continent and create a regional economy that can help them to be much more self-sufficient, so they do not have to take sides, if you will, in this conflict and become sites of proxy wars. So Africans and South Americans have to decide on not which side to fight on, but to realize that they have their own sides that they need to work for, and that they can do that. They can become regional economic powers,
Mhm.
and so that they don't have to become the vassals of the U.S. or the East or the West.
And with the last 3 minutes, Dr. Tawhid, I want to ask you about China as a socialist state
Mhm,
politically with
mhm,
capitalist aspects. Do you with capitalist aspects of their economy, because
mhm,
they're still very much in the socialist process.
mhm,
We see what they did with lifting, billions of people out of poverty. You
mhm,
can only do that through socialism. That's just you know. But I mean, do you see that being a benefit to African nations? Which, by the way, all of Africa is not worse than pre-Mandela South Africa.
mhm,
Brian C. Oh my goodness, we need to travel to the continent and see that our people are not over there living in huts.
mhm,
Just anyway, let me get back to the. Do you think that China, being a socialist country politically with capitalist aspects to its economy,
mhm.
could be a benefit to African nations?
It could be, but the African nations have to be able to negotiate with China as equals, as opposed to as with a handout. And that's going to take regionalism, if not the entire continent coming together to one pool their resources, realize where they have their resources, and not ha- and to rely on relationships with China of trading relationships instead of borrowing relationships. Once you start to borrow money, it's in yuan instead of dollars. But now you become dragged into the financial part of capitalism. China seems to continue to want to be to move into a direction of a socialism of the Scandinavian type.
Hmm.
Norway, Denmark, those are so democratic socialist countries. They are still
Right.
capitalists in their economy, but they are social welfare states. And
Hmm.
G seems to be moving in that direction, but that's internal to China. How China deals with other parts of the world is going to be either as a either as master to servant, or equal to equal. And African nations need to want to be equal to equal, and that's going to take some unification of the African continent.
As always, we are always advocating for internationalism and the unification of one united Africa under scientific socialism here in Lukman Nation. That's what we believe. That's what we fight for. And Dr. Tawhid, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Appreciate your insight. I know you have to go. Uh, just thank you so much for your time, and see you next time. I'm going to stay
Yeah,
on, y'all.
always must appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. I'll always love to have Dr. Tauheed on because he's just, I don't know any really a whole lot of economists except for, maybe Richard Wolff and yeah, pretty much, who I actually want to talk to about these issues because they demystify them. They make them not so uh heady and over the top. And Dr. Tauheed is great at that. And he's always excited to come on and share his knowledge. And I really appreciate that. Excuse me. I want to get to some of your comments. Okay. So Brian C said, I'm Nigerian. Saying that all of Africa is worse off than pre-Mandela South Africa, and you being from Nigeria, is like me saying George Wallace was right. We all do need, all the black people do need to be kept separate from the white people because we are dirty and we don't know how to manage our money and we tear our neighborhoods up. And I, yeah, I understand you have a particular perspective, but being from the continent, but being someone who is an African in America, I'm not going to look at all of the Africans in this country and all of the communities in this country and say that they're all shit because, the white people said so. Because the system that we exist in this country continues to oppress our people. We're living in a domestic colony, stripped of rights, stripped of real political representation, no political power, very much like Africans on the continent who are in these comprador states that are propped up by the US and European multinational corporations and their money, much like those people are. So I understand that their struggle is against the system of imperialism, of global white supremacist hegemony, capitalist imperialism, of NATO gangsterism. I understand that is the struggle. It's not that folks are just we're just so fucked up. If that's the case, then look, go sit in the corner somewhere and watch the empire collapse and collect your crumbs where you may find them. That's not what I choose to do. I choose to have the revolutionary optimism of all of the people who came before me, who fought those struggles for liberation against their former colonizers that people said would never happen, and those people who lost their lives in that struggle because they dared to struggle against their former colonizers for liberation and struggle toward socialism, scientific socialism, many of them. I choose to have the revolutionary optimism of those people that, yes, one day Africa will be free, one united Africa under scientific socialism. That's what I fight for. That's what we believe here in Lukman Nation. And I appreciate you hanging out with me. I'm going to go get ready for my webinar that I'm very excited to be on with my comrades over in the Albuquerque All African People's Revolutionary Party. They are having a fabulous teach-in tonight. Not fabulous because I'm on it, fabulous because the topic is dope, getting into some history, which I love. History of NATO, the history of NATO aggression against Russia, the history of NATO and colonization on the continent. This is why we're not defeatist in what we're up against. We know the history. We know our enemy. We know that all empires fall. This one is on its way. So thanks a lot, y'all. We appreciate you here in Lukman Nation, me and Brewski. Talk to you soon. As always, can I leave a link? Wait a minute. Let me see if, let me get a link. Hold on. Let me get a link for you. let's see. I was on the show today, and I actually forgot that today was Friday because I've been so busy with so many of these webinars, discussions, teach-ins about Ukraine. It is very important that we understand what's going on and why it's going on, the history behind it. And why can Jacqueline not find the link? Ricky, help me out. Let's see. Where is that link? Doggone it. Of course, now I have to go into my inbox because I can't find it on Facebook because I have 13 tabs open. Let's see. Let me find it. Okay, here we go. I think. Is this it? That is not it. Help me out, Ricky, because I can't find this link right now. And it's only because I am so tired. Let's see. Where are you? Okay. I am looking and I am just. Oh, okay. Let me see. Okay, please, yes, Ricky, put direct links in the chat if you can. And if they can't show up in the chat, send them to my Facebook chat, and then I will post them because my brain is scattered right now, and I'm trying to keep a whole bunch of stuff, keep my little outline straight. So yeah, I definitely hope you all have had a good week. And I don't see the links. Let me go over to YouTube, see if they show up there, because I forget that they don't show up. Talk about not being prepared. Lord. Let's see. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing them. I don't know why. Oh, I got it. Okay. Woo. See, I do not have my shit together all the time. I just don't. I am sorry, but I just don't. And thank God for comrades who do. There you go. Oh, you gonna act up now? Yes, you are. You're gonna act up now. There we go. All right. There's your link to register, and you'll get a link to join the webinar. Starts at 8 p.m. So I have to hop off here, do my last run through to make sure I stay under my 10-minute limit. And I will see you all probably there, but I'll definitely see you soon. Y'all have a good weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. Subscribe to Black Power Media. Share this video. Follow Black Power Media on Twitter, Black Power Med, MED1. Support Black Power Media on Patreon, patreon.com/Black Power Media, and all that good stuff. Yeah, I'm getting tongue tied. I gotta go. I'll see y'all soon. Peace. And they are out here throwing up the peace sign like they want something. Yep. I don't understand what they think they want.
I need to revise. I did see white people this happy. I gave the example of America and the Allies' defeat over Nazi Germany. But I haven't seen this many white people happy. There was a couple periods in history. One was when Nutella was introduced. And I mean, I haven't seen that many white people happy since Nutella was introduced and marketed and stuff. Because white people love Nutella.
They booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for their prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all blind before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. I had them all blind before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. Boarded that flight to Amsterdam. When my accountant and minus my family found out too and didn't like it. You're not in this alone. What Dale said and I thought he was biased. Then I got a Venmo that said copy the finest. Before my foolishness settled in. Recorded a whole tape before we got to Berlin. This close to giving up and now never again. Don't overlook the work and come expecting to win. In the end, my word, never put nothing with the squad. Got it right up under their nose with your fighter facade. Off the cliff with broken wings, I'm aware of the odds. Enough faith for us all, I'm the one for the job. Most days, catching sun rays, baby, look like the front page. Overthinking what they might say, have it your way. Yeah, the biggest threat is something they never seen. Dial it up, patch me into the screen. I had them all blind before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all blind before I dial up.